everybody, and welcome to this morning's Job Train How talent session on delivering a consistent candidate experience. I'm Giles. I'm the Director of Strategic Development here at Job Train. I'm delighted to welcome you all to this session, and a special thanks to my guests, Adam and Kate. Before we get started with introductions and all the rest of it, can I just check that people can see and hear us okay? If you could just put a quick note in the chat, that'd be great. Thank you very much indeed. We're live on LinkedIn as well, so good morning to everybody who's joining us on LinkedIn. For those of us on Crowdcast, just a little bit of housekeeping and whatnot. This session and these sessions is the second of 3 sessions around candidate experience. This is very much for you. So we want them to be interactive. We'd love you to ask questions as we go through or make any comments and that kind of thing. And also, you may have seen that Laura put in the chat that we have polls running as well. We'd love you to get involved in the polls. We've got, actually some of you got involved already. We've got 3 questions. How consistent would you rate your recruiting process across the different teams? Which of these is your biggest inconsistency headache? We'll have a chat about those and dive into that. And then finally, when you leave the webinar today, what's the one consistency problem you're solving first? People have started answering that already, and we haven't even had the chat, so this is great. But yeah, please get involved, and we'd love to hear what's important to you, and that will help focus our conversation a little bit as we go through as well. So just to frame this, this all started a few months ago when we did a session with the Talent Labs. It was one of their Collaborate days. There was 100 TA leaders in the room. We talked about a range of topics, but we had a number of sort of hackathons, roundtable discussions. And I, along with my colleague Gary, led on candidate experience. And it just surfaced so many common themes that I think we've probably all seen, all experienced over the years. And what we thought we'd do is 2 things. Firstly, we produced a bit of a white paper on all the discussions that we had. There's a link to that within here. And then secondly, I thought, well, do you know what? I'll start doing some webinars as well. So we tried to group some of the challenges together under sort of broad headings. And we're running 3 sessions. And this is the second one. We're tackling hiring managers in September. But today we're talking about consistency. And I'm delighted to be joined by Adam and Kate. So let's get started with some introductions. Kate, good morning.
Good morning, Giles. Good morning, everyone.
Would you like to give us a quick introduction to you?
Yes, I will do. So my name is Kate Sarama. I'm Head of People for Bowel Cancer UK, and our people include both our employees and our volunteers. So we have about 100 employees and about nearly 200 volunteers.
Brill. Thank you very much, Kate. And Adam, good morning.
Morning, Giles and Kate. And hello, everyone. My name's Adam O'Shea. So I'm the Head of Talent Acquisition for Aspris Children's Services. So we are a group of specialist education schools and residential children's homes up and down the UK.
Brill. Thank you both very much. So to kick this one off and to frame it a little bit in terms of the conversations that we had a while back and what we put in the white paper is that consistency throughout an entire recruiting process, it can be broken really quite easily. Sometimes you have different teams running different hiring processes, or certainly a range of different stakeholders, whether that's the marketing team from an employer brand perspective, it might be the hiring team themselves, you might have hiring managers involved in the process. And at the back end of the process, it might be HR or onboarding teams. There's a range of different people that like to get involved. And sometimes that's where consistency can break a little bit. Similarly, even within, dare I say, the ATS, and these sessions are not about selling Job Train at all. Really happy we've got 2 of our clients on today. But, sometimes there can be inconsistencies with the applicant tracking system, or there can be opportunities for automation that might smooth things out a little bit. But that's another area as well. So what we're going to try and do is probably cover a few areas this morning. Sort of how we might go about building is almost like a bit of a benchmark journey, and then how do you then apply that journey, at least as sort of a baseline consistent process across an organization. How do you best automate where there might be silent touch points where you might potentially lose people from the process? We might talk about accessibility and inclusion a little bit, and the importance of that being consistent through the process. We might just touch on hiring managers a little bit as well, although we have got a hiring manager session in September. So with that in mind, let's start in terms of perhaps just a few opening comments from you, Kate, around sort of what is your experience and what the main challenges you've seen in and around consistency.
Absolutely. I think one of the challenges is the whole starting process from the beginning. And for us, it was really important to use a system that allowed us flexibility, but also for equity and inclusion. And we looked at that as an overview in all the procedures we set up. And we also were really aware that our candidates had their real lives, and some of them come and they need reasonable adjustments as well. So for us, that was extremely important. And the starting point for us was the whole application process. And we felt that we had a really robust system in being able to use the flexibility that JobTrain allowed us, and in having we did away with CVs, for example. We have a very short application form. There's no names, so we have unbiased selection. So for us, that was a really important starting point. The system as well allowed us to automate a lot of our functions, such as setting up invitations to come for interview, to also reject candidates, but to set up templates for that, and to also create a really good, robust onboarding experience. And we've had really good feedback on that from candidates.
That's brilliant, Kate. So did you map out, sort of ATS stuff aside, did you map out your entire candidate journey from start to finish?
Yes, we did.
Points, different stakeholders and things, and then almost have that as your to-be process, if you like.
Yes, exactly right. That's what we did. And we worked really hard when we were building the system to make sure that each stage reflected what we needed it to do, but also created a really engaging experience for the candidates as well.
That's brilliant. And Adam, how about you? So Kate, I know Kate, have you worked with us 2 or 3 times now?
3 times.
3 times. Wow. Adam, you've been working with us for quite a while, so your process is quite mature now, isn't it? Albeit I know that you're constantly making tweaks and changes to it.
Yeah, absolutely, Giles. And I think a big thing for us whenever we're talking about consistency, something that people will hear me say a lot around is, a candidate has one experience, excuse me, regardless of the touch points that they have. So I think a big thing for us whenever we're considering a part of the process and a part of the journey is, to a candidate, it's one and the same thing. So we want them to have that level of experience, whether it be something that's coming directly from the system as a prompt or a reminder, or if it's coming from someone who works for Aspris, whether that be hiring manager, onboarding administrator, recruiter, whatever that might be in terms of that part of the journey. I think where those touch points don't align, that's the biggest gaps for consistency. And as I'm sure everyone on the call will know, whenever there are gaps of information and candidates feel like they're unsure of the next step or unsure of where they are in that journey, I think that's our biggest opportunity for inconsistency, and then puts their experience at risk. So I think a big thing for us when we look at our process and our different touch points, it's around that balance of having enough but not too much, right, in terms of different stages throughout that process, and then how much we can utilize technology. And the ATS is a really good example of that, of how much can be ready made for hiring managers, knowing that the hiring managers at our schools and at our homes have many different caps to put on. Recruitment is one of the caps they wear as part of their important work. So it's an amazing our big approach was, how much can we take off the manual element of a hiring manager needing to type out 100 emails, or because that's where the inconsistency will come in based on people's demands and people's time. So if we can bolster that with really engaging, competent content, actually we know that a candidate's touch point and journey throughout that is a really thorough one, and one that gives them the best chance of success, or at least the best chance of good engagement, because that also includes candidates that unfortunately aren't successful for whatever reason, or if roles aren't necessarily for them. So something we're considering all the time, Giles, is how is there an opportunity where we can ultimately increase and enhance the candidate journey through that consistency of approach? So it's been something that absolutely JobTrain has certainly helped us tailor for people as well, which is important.
That's brilliant. So, I mean, I imagine for everybody here, as primary recruiters or people in HR, will probably all have a really clear vision for what we want the recruitment process to look like and how it should operate seamlessly to make sure it is consistent. But given that you will have quite a few different stakeholders and touch points, especially in terms of people rather than perhaps process, how have you managed to get everybody aligned, on board, bought in and committed to following that process and making sure it is consistent? Who wants to go first? Kate?
You can, Kate. Absolutely. I never want to jump in. You please carry on.
Well, we're constantly reviewing our processes and procedures, and we actually take feedback from our recruiting managers really seriously. And they've been a great source for us in providing feedback on how we can improve or update the system. And we do that virtually every week. So we're always enhancing and developing the system. And I think for us, that's why we really enjoy working with JobTrain, because we've got that flexibility in the system. And that's so important. So I'd say that's our key point. But we also have done lots of process flows, and we've done short videos for recruiting managers. So we put them on our intranet at work so they can refer to them really easily and see how they can follow procedure, and also manage themselves more efficiently and effectively with their time if they're recruiting, because we're all really conscious that managers' time is so important these days.
That's really interesting, because it kind of plays quite nicely to your point, Adam, especially around hiring managers themselves. They're not people that will necessarily be recruiting all the time. Recruitment isn't a central part of their role. They don't have the same degree or level of experience around recruitment, or the importance of things like communication and consistency and all the rest of it that we might do. But you ask them for feedback on their experience of the recruitment process that is being managed by you, with them playing a key part in it. So I think that's really refreshing and really helpful in terms of that two-way feedback. How about you, Adam?
Yeah, I think it's even just the thought of hearing you speak there, Kate. It took me back to Aspris has been made up of different organisations coming together at some stage as well. So people's different levels of experience with systems or with recruitment or whatever that might be, it varies, right? We have people with different levels of, believe it or not, recruitment's not everyone's favourite topic, although I'm sure we'd all argue with that. But I think the key thing for us when we're approaching it with managers to try and get that buy-in, it's a mixture. So we hold face-to-face sessions with kind of big groups of our hiring managers so that we can run through the nuts and bolts ultimately of the system to help people feel comfortable. But we run really regular online sessions with our hiring managers who either might be in need of a refresher, that might be coming fresh to the recruitment process for the first time. And I think it's that two-way conversation to be able to make sure that people are also comfortable enough to maybe share the elements of the process they're either not as comfortable with or not as short run, or stuff that they have questions about and comments on. So, yeah, Kate, I think that element around regular feedback from our hiring managers absolutely rings true to me. I think it's without people being engaged with the process, there's a big opportunity for that process to fall down. And I think it's if we're not, as recruiters and as recruitment functions and people functions, if we're not able to adapt to the needs of our hiring managers, we're really limiting our ability to succeed within that. So yeah, absolutely, we'd always want to make sure we're getting a strong amount of feedback from our hiring managers, or at least to be able to enable us to plan out the next steps of where we want to enhance the system or where we need to enhance our training. I think they're the two things that are really key for us when we're planning out kind of the next steps as well.
Yeah, essentially, I've just had a quick look at the polls. Don't worry, you don't need to just click around and things, Kate and Adam, but over 60% of people were saying that the biggest inconsistency headache was hiring managers sometimes applying different standards. So then I guess we could have to ask ourselves, is that a them problem or is it an us problem?
I think so. Yeah, I think it's a mixture, isn't it? I think the truth is that's a a communication relationship piece that I don't think there's a such thing as just a them or a problem as there in reality. I think if we'd be naive to think as recruiters, if we're speaking to people, for either new managers to the organisation or new managers to a recruitment element, I think the big thing is that everyone has learned something different, and everyone's role is slightly different in each organisation that they work in. And it's certainly not a forget everything you've ever known. I think it's the way that you approach that communication of how and why we work in this way and why this is effective, and the importance of us all having a consistent approach behind that. I think if you approach that conversation in the right way, it doesn't have to be as difficult, but I absolutely, I'm interested in that's people's feedback on the polls, because it's absolutely an experience I'm sure all of us have had at some stage, that some people may be really experienced in one way of working on a particular ATS or a particular method of recruitment. And actually it's about us challenging ourselves to be able to be open to different ways of working as well, which is important.
Yeah, definitely. I mean, I think in all walks of life, one of the most important things is communication. And in my experience, about 95% of things that goes wrong, it's due to some kind of inconsistency or breakdown in communication there, and that certainly bears out in my experience. And I think it's so refreshing that you both got that two-way dialogue between you and the hiring manager community about, well, what's your experience of the recruitment process, what works, what doesn't, what's a barrier, what's frustrating, where could it be improved, enhanced, and I think that's great. I'm not going to spend this whole session talking about hiring managers, because otherwise that's going to take away from something already planned in September. But do you, or have you ever considered or implemented any kind of more formal hiring manager training around not just how to assess, but actually around their understanding or their grasp of the recruitment process? Which might include things like the importance of candidate experience, the importance of them receiving a consistent experience, and almost then having some kind of a system whereby a hiring manager might be, as part of their own personal professional development plan, identified as fit to hire or okay to hire. Anything like that? Have you explored that before?
Shall I go first, Adam, or you?
Again, I can go first this time if you like. I think, interesting, Giles. It's not necessarily something we've done as a badge of fit to hire or not to hire. That absolutely, we look at kind of bespoke development plans for different hiring managers across the organisation, depending on their probably their level of experience, but also feedback we gather from candidates as well, because something that's really important is the best person to tell us about their experience is the candidate, right? So feedback from the candidates in terms of even how they received certain communications, or how they were booked onto an interview, or how certain elements and certain details were confirmed. I know something we've spoken about before, Giles, is that I'm really passionate about the fact that we have to marry up a consistent approach around our technology, but also a really consistent approach of our people behaviours ultimately. And without those two things, you're really limiting your chances of success. But if you have both of those two things in place, a really engaged person who can still do people elements where appropriate, and a system that backs that up with we've said what we're going to do, and this is what happens, and this is what you've got behind it, I think you're really teeing yourself up and gearing yourself up for success. So what we try and do is we have got a series of on our hub, our intranet system, where we've got guides and kind of step-by-step elements of each area of the process, so we can identify a commitment from ourselves in terms of timeframes, in terms of what we're delivering at different stages, also in terms of at what stage the system can really help you do that as well, so that we can hopefully help our hiring managers to really understand where they can be the key difference makers, and where that can really provide the most impact ultimately to a candidate experience and candidate journey. So I think it's a really interesting approach in terms of the kind of overall review. It's something we might go in and probably have a little think about in truth, Giles, because I think you're right. I think it's for the benefit of hiring managers being able to have feedback as part of their consistency of approach as well. It can only help, right? So I think that's definitely something we'll probably go in and have a little look at, to be fair.
Hey, Kate.
Yes, and likewise, Adam, we've found two strategies have really helped us. One is similar to you in terms of putting user guides and flow charts and video clips on our hub where hiring managers can access them really easily. And I think the second part has been really transformational for us, has been that we've developed a values-based competency framework.
Mm-hmm.
And we've actually used that as part of our hiring process. So we've then drafted, for example, scoring matrices and interview questions that are related to each of the competency areas that hiring managers can refer back to and use them as part of the process. So that we've had really good feedback on, and they've said that that's really helped to enhance the whole recruitment process.
That's really interesting. I'm just starting to tap away and make some notes there because there's some things that reminded me and not want to. I remember there was a classic example of poor communication and poor consistency. So bless her, my now ex-wife, I used to help her when she was applying for roles and things, and she was approached directly by recruiters at a very well-known brewing company. I won't name them here. And the recruitment team was specifically tasked with going and looking at regional sales managers and regional salespeople outside of the licensed trade that could have really good transferable skills to bring into this organisation. And she was approached and she was really interested, really enthused. I helped her through a very laborious online ATS application process, and she got invited through to interview. The first stage was an interview with the hiring manager, who then dragged her through a licensed trade competency interview questionnaire and process. And at several times she had to stop the hiring manager and say, look, I don't have any experience in licensed trade. I've been approached specifically on the understanding that I don't have that, but I've got transferable skills. And that was the basis on which we started this conversation. And she cried at the end of the experience because she felt that she'd failed. She felt she'd done a bad job. And this was just due to a breakdown of communication between the recruitment team and the hiring managers. So it goes to show the importance of that line of communication, everybody understanding what the goals, aims and objectives are from any given piece of recruitment, and making sure that everybody's aligned and informed about that as well. And I think it's really good, Kate, that you've got that consistent competency framework, because again, sometimes where I see things break down is you might have a very clear application process. You may use some form of scored assessment forms and questionnaires, which we are a massive fan of, especially at this age of candidates using AI a lot, so move away from those text-based questionnaires because they're awful and they're very difficult for managers to objectively assess and what have you. So you may have a really good initial stage, but then when it comes to interview, if the hiring managers if they haven't got access to that information or not being encouraged to go and review that information first and have a really clear roadmap on the types of questions they should be asking and a clear method of scoring or recording evidence or feedback from that interview session, then that can be a real challenge as well.
You're absolutely right. I think that was unfortunately not a very nice experience for her at all, right? That's and that's the you're right. A consistent communication point throughout that process would have helped her a lot and helped that hiring manager a lot, because I'm sure they felt a certain way at the back end of that as well. I think in truth, you're right. It's something we talk about a lot of the time. It seems like a bit of a phrase, but just the one source of truth, right? So if you can have all of your information around your recruitment journey and your recruitment process in one place for people to access, there is only one version of that. So you're already increasing that consistency, particularly around where you might have teams that have, central colleagues, recruitment or onboarding administrators working as part of a central function, working alongside our schools and homes as we do. It's really important to have somewhere that they can communicate so there isn't any kind of loss in translation. About people's availability, particularly if they're candidates that have been sourced directly by our recruiters. We try and utilise the ATS the best we can to create that consistency as well. So actually, from a hiring manager's point of view, I know we go back to hiring managers, but from their point of view, regardless of where those candidates are coming from and where they're being sourced from, actually there is one process for them to concentrate on, and that already breeds a bit of consistency within that space as well, which is great.
Yeah, definitely. I mean, going back and looking at that specific example and picking it apart a little bit, yeah, there could have been an upfront conversation between the recruiters and the hiring managers to say, this is the approach we're taking in terms of sourcing people. This is what we've agreed. But simply at the point of saying, right, here's the shortlist of people you're going to be interviewing, there could have been some clear, even just an email, just to explain, here's a summary of each profile. Here's why we like them, or here's why we are recommending them. And by the way, these are things to point out. This person doesn't have licensed trade experience. But remember, we're looking to recruit outside of that. So we're looking at, at raw talent here rather than necessarily licensed experience. So I think sometimes, and I find it refreshing, Kate, that you actually make that process visually available and accessible for everybody that's involved in it.
Yes.
So then you can see almost like sometimes it's like a swim lane diagram, isn't it? In terms of these are the different phases, these are different people that are involved, these are their roles or expectations, needs, wants and things. And I don't know if perhaps you can tie things like KPIs to some of those in terms of this is our goal for how quickly we want to move through each phase of recruitment process. Bear in mind the different types of hires are likely to take, different length of time.
Yes, yeah, that's actually really interesting. I love the idea about the KPIs. So that's another area of our development.
It's just a thought. I mean, sometimes things like even prompt reporting, because you may have an idea or a vision in terms of this is how we want to consistently deliver a recruitment process or a recruit within a given length of time. But prompt reporting within a system itself can start to highlight where there might be particular challenges or areas or opportunities for improvement, or where things might be sort of dropping a little bit. So that's something else that can be done with tech.
It's been a really important implementation for ourselves. Actually, is around we wanted to really focus on our time to hire, but from a granular perspective, really just look at that first engagement touch point and how important that is. We know that particularly within our sector, there are, from a competitive standpoint, we know that if we're not quick to be able to engage people in the right way, we really run the risk of someone beating us to that candidate and that talent. And so a big part of that is we do have kind of prompt reporting around KPIs, specifically around that first touch engagement, Giles. And I think that immediately, if we can engage people within that space, and once that wheel starts to turn of their process, I think it's really important. It's definitely helped us and helped our hiring managers and teams understand the importance, because you see the higher level of engagement as that goes on. Of course, it's not 100% of candidates are 100% successful all the time. That's the nature of recruitment. We already know that. But I think particularly where in a competitive area, we know that talent are applying for multiple jobs at once. It's not a one application and hope that goes well. It's it's a really good point, Giles, because we know how important and how useful the prompt reporting has been for us in terms of that improvement of that engagement at first hand. And I think instead of looking at our time to hire as one big beast, we've tried to make that a little bit more granular and say, well, let's start at the beginning. And it's been really useful for people to see the improvement of that, and people get a little bit energized around, competition breeds some success sometimes, right? So I
wasn't going to start mentioning about leaderboards and things, but sometimes it's really healthy in terms of getting people excited about them either being particularly good or particularly efficient at delivering their part of the recruitment process versus those that may need a bit of extra support.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, you're absolutely right, Giles. I think the way that we can utilize technology and reporting and data around that really informs our decisions, right? That's the joy of having data to hand from systems and from different areas, and particularly where we're seeing, dropout points from candidates at certain stages. I think that really highlights areas of improvement organically, so that you understand where there may be a gap of either a communication touch point or a consistency of information to candidates or to hiring managers. I think someone put a comment in the chat around the putting yourselves in the candidate's shoes and understanding that it's a big decision to go with an employer or a new role or a new location or whatever that might be. And I think that it's a really always a good empathetic point to put yourselves in those candidate shoes and understand where that could be tightened up or where that could be enhanced. And I know particularly we've worked really hard with yourselves on the onboarding hub and on that side of things in terms of the visual aspect, where people can almost self-serve to a point in terms of certain aspects of their journey. And I think that also really elevates the level of consistency that we can provide as well, which we've certainly felt the benefit of.
Yeah, and I think sometimes it's too easy to think of using that data or a prompt report or a red, amber, green, rag report, or whatever it might be in terms of KPIs, to use that as a stick to beat people with. But I think it'd be a really good collaborative tool to say, let's have a look at the recruitment process in entirety. What's working, what isn't, and where can we look to improve things? What are the barriers right now? And that isn't necessarily people to do with stakeholders in the recruitment process. It could do with candidate behaviour. We're not being clear in our communication. We're not setting expectations enough. We're not moving quickly enough because we are competing with other people within a different sector. And I think probably potentially for both of you, when you're in regulated hiring, you cannot help but onboarding. There's a lot of moving parts. The compliance elements are really important, but that's probably one of your biggest opportunities where you can potentially lose people, either through lack of communication or through time lags and that kind of thing. So I think, that's where you kind of bring everybody in. And I think for new hires, that's possibly where you bring in the person's new line manager as well, get them involved and engaged in keeping the communication going with new hires, making sure it is consistent, that they're excited, that they're still engaged and informed, and they're not thinking what's happened next while they're getting all these other job offers coming in from other recruitment agencies or roles they previously applied for and things. Philippa made an interesting point about recruiting managers have a different level of understanding of using the ATS and or time to want to learn how to use. And I think it's our responsibility to explain the value of these tools in order to help them to achieve the objectives. And the objectives here, we all want the same goal, right? We need to attract and recruit the very best people to help our organisations grow and thrive. So that's our ultimate goal there. And I think if the hiring managers if we can help them to understand the importance or the value of the tools that are being used in the recruitment process to help achieve that outcome, but at the same time, there's an open door in terms of feedback about your experience of using it, and that might help get a little bit more engaged. It's too easy to think, it's another tool I've got to use and log into, and I've got my day job to do things.
And I think in truth, it's around trust, isn't it? It's trusting the tools that you have. And I think it's an interesting point in terms of people's different level of experience, because that could also be someone who has a wealth of experience in recruitment, but maybe potentially really experienced using other systems or the processes. And actually it's just around rather than it be something that's, this is the way I've always worked, which is, a phrase that no one ever wants to hear, right? Yeah. I think it's how we approach that in understanding maybe the differences and maybe the differences in particular process. I mean, a really good example is that, so Aspris have been with Job Train for around 5 years now, so which is flown by, Giles. And in truth, our system now looks completely different to how it did when we launched, because we are always consistently looking to evolve the system, whether it be around new updates or tweaks and changes to how we want to operate. And I think it's not necessarily just new managers that would need refreshing on that. Changes to the system mean that everyone as a whole would need to kind of tweak and change their approach to that. So I think the point is absolutely valid of different levels of understanding. And I think that's how important it is to be able to, as Kate sort of began the call with, is around different levels of training opportunity or different levels of resource that you have available to people. Because it is quite bespoke, isn't it? People's different experience and varied experience with systems. And I think how we can create an approach where it's also not a mammoth thing to digest. So we try bite-sized videos of really kind of granular bits of the process. So actually, we also understand that when we do wide-scale demos, we're going through a candidate journey in, an hour. And the reality is they're broken down into things that take a couple of minutes each time, but they're at different points of that person's journey, right? So something we try and stress a lot is around, don't worry if you get to a certain bit and you think, I can't quite remember what that bloke said that time on that call. That's not the point. We don't want to leave that to chance. So there are bite-sized opportunities for people to be able to do that on the fly. So it shouldn't waste too much time as well. And it shouldn't leave them thinking, I've not got time to do this, so I'm disengaged. It should be something that's readily available for them, which I think is great.
That's brilliant. Any comments, Kate?
Well, I just wanted to say, I think if a recruiting manager has a really good experience of the system, I've had feedback from them where that is the case, and they're far more engaged than when they have another vacancy, and they feel more independent and enabled to actually do the recruitment themselves, and builds their confidence too, which is great to see.
Brilliant. So there's probably three more areas I want to touch on. The first is, Kate, something you mentioned right at the very start of this thing, which is really important, is around accessibility and inclusion. Can you talk to us a little bit more about how you've tried to consider that in, right the way through your process, and how do you try and maintain that standard?
Yes, absolutely. Yes, Giles, of course. So at Bowel Cancer UK, I think we do have candidates who have lived experience. So for us, being inclusive was really important from day one. So we looked at the candidate journey from day one right through to the finished point, and we wanted to ensure that we acknowledged that we would provide reasonable adjustments. We wanted to base the whole experience upon our values and the competency framework. So we really approached it with quite a lot of empathy as well, and awareness, and trying to understand what that candidate journey might look like. So that for us has been really, really important, right from the beginning to the end process, and ensuring that all our templates that we set up reflected the appropriate wording, acknowledgement, support, empathy, but also, sort of emphasised that we wanted to get to our end goal, which was to establish that that person was the right candidate for the job. And we also have included that within our onboarding, and that's where the ATS has been so brilliant for us, because we've had excellent feedback from our candidates through the onboarding, and we do our onboarding pretty quickly, even though we have to adhere to certain compliance like DBS checks, etc. So that's been a really positive experience for us.
Well, how about you, Adam?
I think in a really similar way in terms of lived experience. A lot of our candidates and our colleagues who have a passion to come and work at Aspris around supporting some of the most vulnerable young people in the country, and a lot of that can present itself from across kind of ASD and SEN needs, and I think it's people with either lived family experience or some level of experience themselves, around certain aspects. So it's absolutely at the forefront of what we want to be able to provide as part of that kind of consideration of the journey. I think interesting you touched on kind of language, Kate, and the importance of consistency of language is absolutely massive. And a big thing that we talk about a lot is around our brand and our approach of people understanding and interacting with Aspris. It has to be so consistent because it's a reflection of who we are and what we're trying to achieve as well. And I think a lot of what you've just mentioned there, Kate, really rang true in terms of how we're kind of approaching our processes. I mean, we've not actually moved to kind of anonymized applications yet, but that was something I'm sure I'll probably get in touch with you and have and ask you about your experience after this. But it's just really interesting that we always think, and actually it's probably the truth, we always feel like we've just scratched the surface, and there's a lot more for us to be able to enhance and achieve in the kind of inclusivity space. And it's something that I think, whether we like it or not, is changing all the time and it's moving all the time. And I think we need to be agile as recruiters and as organisations to be able to fit the needs of our candidates and our organisations. We're actually having we've got a kind of third party coming and doing a review of all of our communications at the moment in terms of from an inclusivity perspective and our whole recruitment policies and processes, which we're looking to be to launch for September in terms of making those tweaks and changes. So something absolutely we're super committed to. I think we're lucky. I think I'm sure Kate would agree. We've got a system in place at the moment where it is it's easy to manage and it's easy to change and it's easy to have ownership of that. And I think the flexibility and customization of your own processes is kind of paramount to be able to give you the keys to be able to do it. We're not blocked by, oh no, we can't change that because we'll have to do this. You can be quite rapid, can't you, in terms of the amount that you'd want to be able to change and enhance. So yeah, I'll absolutely be reaching out, Kate, to get some feedback from yourself as well.
If you're okay to share it, who are you using for that piece of work?
We're using a company called Comms Rebel, who have helped us with some work in the past in terms of a big project that we're doing around belonging and around, you know, our look and feel in terms of our candidate, but also our colleague experience about what it's actually like to work at Aspris and how we're kind of celebrating those elements as well. So it's a big bit of work that I know that we're really proud to be part of, because I think it's so important that people are conscious of those elements of where to be able to improve as well.
And that's amazing. And a question for you both. It's not a loaded question at all. So if somebody within the application process has indicated that they have or they'd like special consideration, or they have special requirements and needs and what have you, how do you ensure that that is then specifically, well, it's highlighted, B, it's seen and always delivered upon right the way through the process, regardless of how many stages there are, because that's quite a complex one and difficult to manage with lots of people managing different aspects of the recruitment process. Kate, how about you?
Well, I'll go first then. Yes. So well, basically, we oversee that in HR with the recruiting manager. So an example would be where we've had a candidate who's asked for a summary of the questions that might be asked ahead of the interview. But we've always ensured that where that is requested, we do the same for anybody who's been shortlisted. So there's some continuity in the approach, and we give everyone the same chance. Yeah.
How about you, Adam?
Yeah, I think there's a couple of bits really. The ATS has definitely helped in terms of kind of questions we can put in around highlighting that at the forefront of hiring managers as well, so nothing's lost in the information of an application form. And I think that already builds the awareness, isn't it, in terms of and certain aspects and icons that you can build into the systems. I also think that the way that we like to think or are always conscious of being able to provide or even struggling at an aspect of the application. So I think touch points to people to go to help with that as well. So you know, we know that there's going to be a variety of people interacting with our application forms, and if there is an area where for some reason you know, someone might be struggling for that particular point, we absolutely want to be on hand to be able to do that as well. So we pick that up directly with our recruitment team, who go directly with candidates and walk through some of those application features as well. And then it also gives us the first-hand experience of that candidate, so that we know, okay, this could be an opportunity for us to tweak and change to enhance someone else's experience. Because the worst thing about that would be not knowing, right? If we don't know that someone is coming into some difficulty at a certain point of our journey, that would be the most heartbreaking point, because their experience is compromised as part of that, and then we would never be able to fix it. We'd never be able to put something in for the future. So
yeah, and unfortunately, the candidate experience is probably going to be highlighted by the worst aspects that they have, or the negative aspects they have, rather than all the amazing work that's been done up front all the way through to that particular point in time, wherever it falls down. So it is tough and it is challenging. And with that in mind, Kate, I know you've done at least 3 ATS implementations that I know. And Adam, I don't know how many you've done. But not just to talk about ATS, but to talk about systems. So when, and I'm conscious that I don't want this to be just a job training conversation, but also just as you will have different stakeholders as part of a recruitment process, you may also use different systems as well, right? So you might use third-party assessments. You are more than likely, you've alluded to already, using things like DBS or right to work ID verification, that kind of thing. So you've got actually other systems that sometimes can be, you may perhaps forget actually form part of that candidate experience. In your view, when you've come to approach an applicant tracking system implementation or any system implementation, what advice would you give to anybody here in terms of what's worked well, but also any particular pitfalls there might have been or learnings you've had from previous experience, because I think sometimes you will start off, and this is a really interesting comment that you made, Adam, about the importance of flexibility with any system or systems that you work with. So you may have your amazing 2B process, you put a whole load of time and effort and love and care and attention into setting all aspects of the system up with columns, templates, or application forms and things, but needs change. But also things do get changed and altered along the way, and then sometimes things can start to drift a little bit. So I was interested in any sort of hints and tips, experiences, both good and bad, that you've had, and advice you might give to anybody here on where they can improve the systems they work with, whether it's initial implementation or ongoing management of them. Adam, we'll start with you.
Okay, yeah, no problem. So, otherwise, me and Kate will be polite forever and just wait for one of us. I think my biggest advice would be around ensuring that if you've got multiple systems that, and likely everyone has multiple systems that are all feeding part of the same candidate journey, so also exploring how much of those things can work together and how much you can automate and integrate those systems to build that consistent approach already. I think it's interesting that you mentioned, Giles, around the building of all great communications through different aspects, and we had a really good example. We looked to shift some of our feedback loop of candidates because at the time we used a third party system, and actually even the look and feel of that experience was totally different. Of course, it limited our number of people that were engaging as part of that feedback loop, and how important is feedback as part of any process and any journey and any anything that you're looking to grow on. So I think our big part of that was around how can we weave that in to make it more consistent as part of just the one approach. So yeah, I think my biggest takeaway, or my biggest advice from implementations and planning, etc., would be just ensuring that everything complements each other and it doesn't feel like an alternate experience. I feel like if I try and really simplify it, if you're looking at doing some online shopping or whatever it might be, if you feel like you're on one website and then it takes you onto something that's a completely different look and feel, immediately your behaviour is, I don't know what I'm on here for. Is this the website I'm after, or is it not? I think as soon as there's any element of confusion within that, I think you're already in an area where you've got some improvement to do. So I think really be conscious and challenge your providers to be able to give you the most consistent approach and consistent feel, so that if they're joining Aspris or if they're joining Bowel Cancer UK, they know that they're joining those two organisations throughout any part of that. And I think that's my massive takeaway for any of those things.
Yeah, there's a wry smile there from me, just because I think I'd say to anybody here, whether I think a lot of people here probably don't use or work with us, but remember that whatever vendor or vendors you use as part of to deliver your process, they are stakeholders too, and perhaps even as part of the process of review, when you're looking at different vendors, really try and establish how closely they will work and they will partner with you. Not just through the implementation, but on an ongoing basis as well. How much flexibility is there within the tools or the platforms that you're choosing? How and can they? What's the capability of them growing with you? Are there costs if you want to make adjustments when you go through? Because any platform should be fluid. It needs to be dynamic. It does need to grow with you, and you need to be sure that you're not suddenly going to get charged for that. But you want your chosen vendor to be in the room with you, working with you in partnership to make sure that those changes happen. And I'm not just talking about ATS, I'm talking about other systems here, because invariably you will have other systems. And if needs be, you'll want to have those vendors potentially talking to one another, not just about an integration, how they talk to one another, but how can we make sure that we're all working together in concert, but that it's consistent all the way through as well. Kate, over to you.
Yes, so I think from
ATS implementations.
Well, I was going to say, I think for me, the most important thing is to have a really realistic project timeline with some contingency built in the planning stage, but also to involve relevant stakeholders like your Marcoms team and IT. That's really critical because they're going to be really instrumental in you building the process. talking about different systems, we're just about putting in an API to link job train through to our HR system, which will really help. So it will automatically transfer some of the data over to our HR system instead of us manually having to input in there for any new starters. So that's going to be exciting.
Great, brilliant. And then finally, as we start to wrap up, I'm interested from both of you, and actually anybody here as well that's joined us this morning, have you or do you test your process? So do you have anybody experience it from start to finish from a candidate's point of view? How is that measured? How often do you do it? I'm interested to see whether you've approached it in that way, just to see what the real experience is like, warts and all, and then how that's refined and improved. Adam?
Short answer is yes. Absolutely. We try and stress test our applications and our experiences as much as we can, really. I think in terms of a time frame, what's always interesting is looking for also in reality new people that can test that for us, because I think it would be probably unwise sometimes, to mark your own homework. And actually, if we know what we're looking for as part of a new element we've added to an application or a new aspect of the onboarding, we know where to find it. It feels a little bit disingenuous to be able to say, yes, we've tested this, it works. So we're really lucky that we have a wider group within the organisation that really focuses on connections. So that's connections with potential new candidates and new colleagues, as well as connecting with colleagues within the organisation as well. So as part of that, we have a number of volunteers that are always keen to test that from different roles and different aspects and different routes, which I think is really, really important, because it gives us really objective feedback in terms of how easy or how difficult. And if we're saying that an application says, on our adverts, if we say, don't worry, it'll only take you 5 minutes. If it takes people 10 minutes, it's not 5 minutes, is it? So I think we always want to make sure that what we're putting on our adverts is accurate. And I think we can only do that by testing as much as we can. So it's a really regular thing, Giles. I would say that it's happening pretty consistently. I think if anything, we're always making sure that any tweaks and changes to any of the communications or systems would always have robust testing around that as well. But we do have regular testing around any kind of feedback that we get from candidates as well. So if it's around a particular experience to fields that they might be struggling with or what have you, we've got a group of people that really applications as well, which is great.
Real. Thanks, Adam. How about you, Kate?
Yes, likewise, we do test regularly, and we also get valuable feedback from recruiting managers. But also I meet with, when the candidates start with us and they have induction, I always ask them about their experience of the recruitment process and onboarding. And that's actually formed some really important feedback for us and some changes that we can make. So we're constantly evolving and developing.
Yeah, that's brilliant. I think there's no replacement from actually going through that entire process end to end, and not just when you do the initial implementation, but on an ongoing basis. Even something as simple as people add things like email templates into the system. They might add what they think is a merge field, for example, to make it a personalized email, but perhaps that merge field hasn't worked or they haven't put the right field in or whatever it might be. So to go through and just identify those little areas that could potentially either cause confusion or inconsistent, was a bit of a broken process. So actually challenge yourself to think, could we automate that? Would that improve things? Or how can we make that a little bit smoother? How can there's always little tweaks and changes that you can make. And going back to what I said before, you should absolutely expect your ATS providers to be willing to work with you on an ongoing basis to make sure that they're supporting you with those tweaks and changes and improvements and enhancements. And sometimes it might be product feedback as well. Actually, this is proving to be a bit of a barrier for candidates. They're struggling with this piece of an application form, or the buttons in the wrong place, or whatever it might be. And they should be willing to work with on that basis, because it's very much in their interests. But also, surprise, surprise, candidates themselves will talk about the ATS that they've applied with. And I can think of some that I've supported my friends with through the process, and some have been great, and others have been just a bit of a nightmare. And actually, I was using a procurement system the other day, which I won't mention here, but we do quite a lot of tenders, and a little bit like an ATS. Some are really easy to use and some are very challenging. So yeah, I think that's really important too. So I think we're almost wrapping up for today. And I just want to say a massive thanks to you, Kate, and Adam, because you've come on for a second time. And I know this is your busiest part of the year in terms of hiring. So thank you so much for giving me your time. I want to thank everybody that's joined us for this morning session. We do have another one that's coming up on the 9th of September, and that will be dedicated to hiring managers. There's so much to talk about. I think, even in today's chat, it's very clear there's so many opportunities for improved communication, improved experience, learning from one another, getting hiring managers bought in, educated, informed, engaged, all that kind of good stuff. So do join us for that session. And if you've got, I think we've got links within there to link in with Adam and Kate, so feel free to do that, link in with me. We hope you have a really good week, and we'll look forward to seeing you hopefully in September. Thanks very much for joining us.
Thanks all.
Bye.